In the mist-shrouded hills of Westmore, a legend has persisted for generations, a spectral carriage drawn by 4 black horses, a harbinger of doom for anyone who dares cross its path. Villagers spoke in hushed tones about the sinister carriage, warning travelers never to approach it, lest they wished to suffer a fate worse than death. It was a foggy evening when a group of tourists arrived in Westmore, eager to explore the quaint, old village and the surrounding eerie landscape. Among them was a man named Peter, a thrill-seeker with a penchant for the supernatural. As the locals shared tales of the ghostly carriage, Peter's curiosity grew insatiable. He dismissed the warnings as mere superstition, convinced that the stories were exaggerated to scare off outsiders. Determined to prove his skepticism, Peter ventured into the forest that bordered the village, his footsteps crunching on the fallen leaves. The air grew colder, and the fog thickened, swirling around him like ghostly tendrils. He wandered deeper into the woods until he reached a clearing where the air seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. Suddenly, from the depths of the fog, he heard the distant sound of hooves pounding the earth. The ground trembled, and a chill ran down Peter's spine as he strained to see through the thick mist. Emerging from the fog, the spectral carriage appeared black as night, its wheels turning soundlessly, drawn by 4 horses whose eyes glowed with an eerie, unnatural light. Peter's heart pounded in his chest, but he stood his ground, mesmerized by the ghostly apparition. As the carriage approached, he noticed that it had no coachman. The reins lay slack, yet the horses moved with a purposeful gait. Against all reason, Peter's curiosity overwhelmed his fear. He stepped forward and leapt onto the carriage, gripping the cold, black iron railing. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The world around him faded into a blur as the carriage sped through the forest, moving with impossible speed. The trees and foliage turned into dark smudges, and Peter's mind swam with a sense of foreboding. He tried to release his grip and jump off, but his hands were frozen in place, as if glued to the railing. The forest around him twisted and distorted, the trees warping into grotesque shapes, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal hands. Shadows danced and flickered in the corners of his vision, and Peter's breath came in ragged gasps. He felt an icy presence close in on him, whispers of forgotten souls echoing in his ears. After what felt like an eternity, the carriage came to an abrupt halt in a desolate clearing. Peter stumbled off, collapsing onto the cold, hard ground. The spectral horses and carriage vanished into the fog as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving him alone in the darkness. His mind was a chaotic whirl of terror and confusion. Hours later, a search party from the village found Peter in the forest, curled up and muttering incoherently. His hair, once dark and lustrous, had turned stark white, and his eyes were wide with an unearthly fear. He could barely speak, but when he did, his voice trembled with the weight of unspeakable horror. Peter was taken back to the village, but he was never the same. The once fearless skeptic now spent his days in a catatonic state, haunted by the memories of the phantom carriage. The villagers, knowing the fate that had befallen him, spoke even more cautiously about the legend, ensuring that no one else would dare to challenge the ghostly apparition of the Westmore woods. And so, the legend of the phantom carriage lived on, a chilling reminder that some mysteries are better left unexplored, and some paths are better left untraveled. Months passed, and Peter remained in the village, a living testament to the horrors that lurked in the forest. The villagers took turns caring for him, offering food and company, though his haunted eyes seldom registered their presence. Whispers about his encounter spread, casting a shadow over Westmore, deterring all but the bravest or most foolhardy visitors. One such visitor was Amelia, a writer known for her fascination with the supernatural. She had heard of Westmore and its dark legend from a colleague and was determined to uncover the truth. Amelia believed that every story had a root in reality, and she was confident she could unravel the mystery of the phantom carriage. She arrived in the village under the pretense of researching local folklore and soon learned of Peter's condition. Intrigued, she requested to meet him. The villagers, wary but hopeful that she might bring some clarity, agreed. They led her to the small cottage where Peter was kept, Amelia found him sitting by a window, staring blankly into the distance. She approached him gently, introducing herself and explaining her purpose. To her surprise, Peter reacted, his eyes flickering with a glimmer of recognition and fear. He muttered fragmented phrases about the carriage, the horses, and the unearthly ride through the forest. Determined to piece together the puzzle, Amelia decided to venture into the forest herself. Armed with a notebook, a flashlight, and a tape recorder, she set out at dusk, retracing the steps Peter had taken months before. The villagers watched her go with a mixture of admiration and apprehension, their warnings still echoing in her ears. The forest was eerily silent, the only sounds her footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. As the fog thickened, Amelia felt a chill run down her spine, but she pressed on, driven by curiosity and a sense of purpose. She reached the clearing where Peter had first encountered the carriage and paused, taking in the oppressive stillness. Hours passed, and nothing happened. Amelia began to doubt the stories, wondering if they were merely the product of collective fear and imagination. Just as she was about to turn back, she heard at the distant, rhythmic pounding of hooves. Her heart raced as the sound grew louder, the ground trembling beneath her feet. Out of the fog, the spectral carriage materialized, exactly as Peter had described. Amelia stood frozen, a mix of terror and exhilaration flooding her senses. She watched as it approached, the ghostly horse's eyes glowing with a malevolent light. But unlike Peter, she did not step forward. Instead, she observed, recording every detail, determined to uncover its secrets. The carriage stopped just a few feet away, and for a moment, Amelia felt a strange compulsion to climb aboard. She resisted, clinging to her rationality. Suddenly, the carriage began to shift and change, the outlines blurring as if it were a mirage. She blinked, and the horses were gone, replaced by foreshadowy figures, their forms indistinct yet undeniably human. A sense of recognition washed over Amelia as she realized these were not just spirits but tormented souls, forever bound to the carriage. One of the figures stepped forward, reaching out to her with a pleading gaze. She felt a pull, a desperate urge to understand, to help. Before she could react, the figures and the carriage vanished, leaving her alone in the clearing. She stood there, trembling, the weight of what she had seen settling in. As she turned to leave, she noticed something half buried in the underbrush, a small, weathered book. She picked it up, its pages yellowed with age, the cover inscribed with an unfamiliar crest. Back in the village, Amelia pored over the book, its contents a mix of diary entries and arcane symbols. It told the story of a noble family cursed centuries ago, their spirits doomed to roam the land, bound to the spectral carriage. The curse could only be broken by someone who could uncover their tragic tale and bring their story to light. As Amelia delved deeper, she realized the full extent of the curse's complexity and the dangerous path she had set herself on. She knew she had to return to the forest, to the place where the carriage appeared, and confront the spirits once more. And so, Amelia prepared for her next journey into the fog-shrouded woods, determined to break the curse and free the tormented souls. But as she ventured deeper into the mystery, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching her, waiting for her to make a move. The villagers watched her departure with a mixture of hope and dread, wondering if she would succeed where others had failed, or if she, too, would become another lost soul in the haunting legend of the phantom carriage. Amelia spent the next few days poring over the ancient book, deciphering its cryptic entries and symbols. She learned of the once illustrious Hawthorne family, whose fortune had been cursed due to a betrayal and a forbidden pact with dark forces. The final entry hinted at a ritual that could free their souls, but it was fraught with peril. Determined to end the curse, Amelia gathered the necessary items for the ritual: a silver mirror, black candles, and an amulet inscribed with the family's crest. She felt the weight of her mission heavy on her shoulders, knowing the risk but driven by a need to uncover the truth and bring peace to the restless spirits. On a moonless night, she ventured back into the forest, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air. The fog was thicker than before, swirling around her like a living entity. She reached the clearing, the oppressive silence broken only by the distant hoot of an owl. Setting up the ritual, she lit the black candles and placed the silver mirror at the center, the amulet resting on top. Chanting the incantation from the book, Amelia felt a surge of power ripple through the air. The ground trembled, and the fog parted to reveal the spectral carriage once more, drawn by the ghostly horses. This time, the shadowy figures of the Hawthorne family emerged from the carriage, their eyes filled with a mix of hope and despair. As the ritual reached its climax, the spirits began to waver, their forms flickering like candle flames in the wind. Amelia's heart raced, knowing she was close to breaking the curse. But suddenly, the ground beneath her feet gave way, and she was engulfed in darkness. She found herself in a nightmarish landscape, the trees twisted and blackened, the air thick with malevolence. The Hawthorne spirits were there, but their expressions had turned to ones of terror. Before her stood a dark figure, its eyes burning with an unholy fire. "You dare to interfere with my domain?" the figure hissed, its voice echoing with the anguish of countless souls. "The curse binds them to me, and now you too shall be bound." Amelia tried to resist, but the figure's power was overwhelming. Her vision blurred, and she felt her life force being drained. The spirits of the Hawthorne family cried out, their voices merging into a mournful wail. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was their faces, twisted in sorrow and regret. Back in the village, the villagers waited anxiously for Amelia's return. Days turned into weeks, and hope dwindled. One evening, a child playing near the forest edge found a small, weathered book partially buried in the ground. It was the same book Amelia had taken with her, its pages stained with blood. The villagers knew then that Amelia had met a tragic end. The forest remained silent, the phantom carriage unseen, but the air was thick with an unspoken fear. They whispered that her spirit now roamed the woods, trapped in a perpetual state of torment alongside the cursed Hawthorne family. The legend of the phantom carriage lived on, more terrifying than ever. The villagers continued to warn travelers to stay away, their voices tinged with the sorrow of knowing another soul had been claimed by the forest's dark secrets. And so, the haunting tale of the ghostly carriage remained, a chilling reminder of the peril that awaited those who dared to unravel the mysteries of Westmore.